Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of the intros, watching the intros to bad Chinese horror movies. This is the episode that I've wanted to do since the start, where we're going to look at the Bunshin Saba movies. Now, we're going to look at 5 clips, Bunshin Saba 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to look at Bunshin Saba versus Sadako 1 and 2. We cannot look at Bunshin Saba versus Sadako 3 because, unfortunately, it is blocked on YouTube. So we just have to make do with the first 2 movies. The third one is brilliant, by the way. But we know we can't watch it. So, without further ado, I'm the Artie Dance. Welcome to this regular series called Watching the Intros to Bad Chinese Movies. I'm going to show you the intro, and then we're going to come back and have a little chat about the movie. So first up is the very first movie in the Chinese Bunshin Saba series, just simply titled Bunshin Saba. Enjoy. So that is the intro to Bunshin Saba. One of the 5... Sorry, let me say that again. The 3 Bunshin Saba movies are in the top 5 of Chinese horror movie box office of all time movie list things. You know, when they calculate the charts of the highest grossing movies, the 3 Bunshin Saba movies are there. They're not number 1. Now, these movies started a craze. And there is a great backstory to the Bunshin Saba stuff. There's a lot of confusion about the Bunshin Saba stuff. To the point where I made a documentary on another channel. What is Bunshin Saba and who is Bxian? So the end, you saw the title pop up on the screen. It said Bxian in Chinese, which means pen fairy. So then you're wondering, why is the movie called Bunshin Saba and not Pen Fairy or Bxian? Well, there's a very, very good reason for that, and it's the source of all the confusion that's happened. The director of this movie is Korean. The director of all 3 of these Bunshin Saba movies are Korean. Now, if you know much about Asian horror, back in 2000, Byung-Hyun, who's the director of this film, or I think it was 2000, might have been around that time, he created a film called Bunshin Saba. No, he created a film called, Bunshin Saba, Ouija Board. It's actually called in English. Bunshin Saba is the name in Korean. And it's a film about a schoolgirl who is a little bit psychic, or has powers, and she gets bullied in school and is able to call a fairy up through an Ouija board or some powers up through an Ouija board, and she takes revenge on the bullies. Then there's something related to her mum, etc., etc. I think it's a pretty decent movie. It doesn't have a very high rating, unfortunately, and not a lot of people actually know about that film. It's called Ouija Board, Bunshin Saba. But the director is Byung-Hyun. So about a decade later, somehow he managed to sign a 3-movie deal in China to make 3 Bunshin Saba films. And he went and did it. For some reason, he has carried the title Bunshin Saba across even though he's called this movie Pen Fairy or Bisian. And as you'll see with the Bunshin Saba versus Sadako intros that we're going to look later, that's the reason there is so much confusion about Bunshin Saba and when you see the Pen Fairy. I'm not explaining this well. Like I said, I've got a documentary about this that explains it really well. Let's have a look at that video. So firstly, an abrupt start. That's my fault. I cut out the intro. There was just an opening credit sequence that I got rid of that didn't really add much to the clip. What we saw is a creepy looking girl and a woman who hangs herself. And then a lolly. We call them lollies in Australia. You call them candies. Drops out of her mouth. Now, I've seen this movie. Bunshin Saba is a great film. It's about a writer who goes to a house in the countryside with her son to continue writing her story. And she's going through a bad divorce. So she needs to get away and write this story. Now, while she's writing this story, some strange things start happening to her son. And this little girl appears in the house and starts kind of taunting her son, harassing her son. So hence we get so that's essentially where the little girl comes into it. Now, Chinese movies, horror movies being Chinese horror movies, in this case, the woman's a bit nuts. She's got a mental illness. That's the explanation for this film. And the lolly dropping out of the girl's mouth actually plays no part in the film. It's a very good intro. I do like the intro because it does have a really good feeling of horror to it. And, considering it's Chinese. Now, it was 2012, so there was a lot looser regulations back there with horror movies. Thus, it does look really well and it does give up a good vibe. The actual movie itself is not too bad. I think the main actress at times is quite a popular actress, well known. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I think she, at times, doesn't do a great job, but mostly she does. And hence, I always thought it was pretty clever. Pen Fairy Bisian, she writes a novel. Writers use pens to write, and in this movie she uses a typewriter. So I always thought Bisian, Pen Fairy kind of made a good link. But, and this is again where a lot of confusion comes in, there really is no Pen Fairy in the film, unless they're trying to say that little girl is the Pen Fairy. And there's no Ouija boards in the movie, which is what Bunshin Saba means in Korean. So the title alone was just done explicitly for marketing purposes. That's it. If you can find that film, I would watch it. The problem is there is no, from my awareness, there is no English subtitled version of it. What I've seen is a really bad machine translated subtitled version of it. So I might have missed some of the subtlety. But in the visual aspects, there's no Pen Fairy, there's no Ouija board in the film. Bit of a lie. But it is available an official Hong Kong DVD release, I believe. And for some reason, that doesn't have English subtitles, which I find extremely odd. But anyway, so if you ever wanted to see it. Now, 1 year later, in 2013, this movie came out. So let's check it out.
Bisian, Bisian, 你是我的前世，我是你的今生。Bisian, Bisian, 你是我的前世，我是你的今生。Bisian, Bisian, 你是我的前世，我是你的今生。笔仙，请你告诉我们，他是谁？笔仙，这个人是不是在我们中间？笔仙。 谁？
So, I like that film. I like Bunshin Saba too. And I think that there was some feedback from the first movie, specifically where was the Ouija board, where was the pen fairy, and hence the movie opens, and that's why I left it in there, it opens with the Ouija board scene, where they call Bixien, who's, it's a kid's game, or a teenage game that girls play in. Well, no, not necessarily girls. Everyone can play it. It's a game that teenagers play in high school. They call Bixien and they ask her a question. And the thing goes that they call her with a pen. And then once they're finished talking to Bixien, they have to bury the pen or otherwise Bixien doesn't go away and she causes trouble. Anyway, that's just a bit of history about what Bixien is. It doesn't happen in this film. This movie, Bunshin Saba 2, is actually a remake of a Korean film called Gawi, or Nightmare. Now, boring title, I get it. This was Byung-Kyan's third Korean movie, I believe, made in 2000. It's not a bad film. Again, just overshadowed by everything else that came out in Korea at the same time. So what he did was he adapted that story for this Chinese movie. Now, lucky for him, the way that movie ended easily fits in with the whole Chinese movie censorship thing. So it actually makes a perfect Chinese horror movie. And in fact, I actually think the Chinese version is better than the Korean one if you watch it, because they actually explain a lot more. And there's also a bonus scene at the end of the film where they go into even a little bit more detail. Now, it's not an exact replica of the film. There are a couple of scenes missing. In the Byung-Kyan original, there's a nude scene at the start in the morgue. That's removed. Also, some of the violence has been toned down a little bit. And in replace of that, about the halfway mark in the movie, when all the friends are gathered around in an apartment to talk about what the hell's going on, they've actually added into this movie a Ouija board scene where they do call Bixien to try and find out what the hell's going on. So hence, they've actually started to make some links and references to the title of the film in this one. I believe out of the three Bunshin Saba movies, this is the one that made the most money in the box office. And really, it is a good film. It has a Korean lead. She speaks Chinese in the film, but it's really interesting that it does have a Korean lead, as well as quite a few other Korean crew members who helped Byung-Kyan make this movie. So that was Bunshin Saba 2, and definitely recommended to watch that one. And as you saw, has English subtitles, so no problems about watching that and not knowing what's going on. So then a year later, in 2014, Byung-Kyan made this film. So I know what you're thinking. That was just a credit sequence. Where's the actual scene in the movie that we're supposed to be looking at? Well, there's a reason. Because that intro sequence actually tells you a lot about the film itself. Bunshin Saga 3 is an original story from Byeonki-an. And this is probably this is the second best movie in the trilogy of Bunshin Saga films. This is great. I actually really like this one. And the part that I like the most about it is straight away, right at the start, Byeonki-an knowing, I've got to deal with the Chinese movie censors straight away. So straight away at the start, he's told you the main character is completely insane. So you know that straight away. It's just that he's so clever that he makes you forget that you know this. So the movie continues on as if everything that's happening is real. And that's where the movie gets you, because you're trying to think, how does it end? How does it end? How does it end? But hold on, he's already told you at the start, she's completely nuts. And so as we know, that is one of the approved endings, to be completely nuts. This movie plays on the Ouija board and calling Bisian a hell of a lot more than the previous movie. There's quite a few more Bisian scenes in this film. So in this movie, the main woman, which you didn't get to see, unfortunately, she gets released from a mental institute. And the first thing she wants to do is regain custody of her child. So she does that. And then she moves out to a village where she's looking for a job. She moves into this really large house. And she's trying to look for a job. And at the same time, she takes on a nanny who's also looking for a job. The nanny I don't want to tell you too much because it will actually kind of spoil the film. But there is a bit of a relationship going on between the nanny and the main lady. They call Bisian to try and work out some spooky stuff going on. There's murders that happen in the town. There's all this really legitimately scary stuff that happens in the house. It's a really decent horror movie for a Chinese movie. And that's all from 2014. So I could imagine when this trilogy of movies come out, and being a Chinese movie lover at the time, I could imagine if you'd have been watching these going, holy shit, we might actually have something here. There might be a future for Chinese horror. But then, of course, the government came in and fucked it all up for them. So, hey, then we started getting the real silly, stupid movies, which is a great segue into the next one. But before I get into the next one, let me wrap up Bunshin Saga 3. It's a great film, and it's one that you should watch. When it comes to the grand scheme of Chinese horror films, definitely one that you should watch, just to get an idea of how Chinese filmmakers could be creative, but also it's kind of a bit cheaty because they're bringing in a Korean guy to do it. Now, let's get on to the big crossover film. Bunshin Saga versus Sadaka, completely unofficial. And as you've seen from discovering Bisian and Bunshin Saga and the way that they just translate the name, it's not an accurate representation of what's going on. The Bunshin Saga versus Sadako name only stuck because of these movies calling Bisian Bunshin Saga and not calling her the Pen Fairy. Because then otherwise, this movie should be called Pen Fairy versus Sadako. But then no one would know that. Anyway, these movies are insane. They're a lot of fun. So let's check out the intro for Bunshin Saga versus Sadako.
我们以血为祭，请求笔仙帮忙。如果不赶走他，死的就会是我们。待会儿，不管你听到什么，看到什么，你都不能松手，知道吗？笔仙，笔仙，你是我的前生，我是你的后世。若要与我续缘，请在纸上画卷。笔仙，笔仙，笔仙，你是我的前生，我是你的。树下。 笔仙，你是我的前生，我是你的后世。若要与我续缘，请在纸上画圈。笔仙，你是我的前生，我是你的后世。若要与我续缘，请在纸上画圈。笔仙，你是我的前生，我是你的后世。若要与我续缘，请在纸上画圈。笔仙，你是我的前生，我是你的后世。若要与我续缘，请在纸上画圈。
昨日、市内で一人の女性が自宅で死亡したことが発見されました。今回の事件でデスビデオは再び世間の注目を集めるようになりました。状況をこれ以上悪化させないように警察は速やかに調査を進めています。
同学们，大家看，这是日本十几。
I'm not going to lie to you. Bunshin Saba versus Sadako movies are a guilty pleasure. And they are quite popular. Every time I make a video about them here on YouTube, I get a lot of views. So I know there's a lot of people out there who really enjoy the Bunshin Saba versus Sadako movies. A lot of people don't actually realize they're Chinese. And also that they don't realize that they have nothing to do with Sadako. There is no link to Sadako itself. In these movies, Sadako is a bad guy and Bisen is a good guy. So it's the whole China versus Japan thing. That's how you got to look at these movies. That's the only link that they have. Now, what I like about it, there's that cool little intro sequence where they're calling Bisen using the Ouija board, and then the cursed video starts playing on the iPhone, and Sadako comes out. And then Bisen's hand comes out and protects the girls from Sadako killing them. That's a scene that actually happens later in the film. The movie then deals with, I think that happens later in the film. Oh, it's been so long since I've seen the film, even though I've said it's a guilty pleasure. And then what you see after the title pops up is all these audio clips of a Japanese news broadcast talking about how all these people have mysteriously died. Before I cut the clip, the camera actually zooms out to a professor in a university, and he appears in all three of the Bunshin Saba vs. Sadako movies. He is a fantastic character. He's utterly brilliant and adds a lot of humor to what would have been quite a silly movie. They're already silly movies, so he kind of camps it up a little bit more and makes the movies so far much more enjoyable, if that made any sense to you at all. Bunshin Saba vs. Sadako follows it's all a dream ending. So all the characters wake up from a dream where something bad has happened. And specifically part 2, we'll talk a bit more about part 2, because part 2 is absolute gold. Part 1 was just kind of finding its feet. I do believe there is an English subtitled version of it, but it is not an official English subtitled version. So the company who made the film never made one with English subtitles. But parts 2 and parts 3 definitely have English subtitles to it. So without wasting any more time, let's get on to the goat of the series, the intro to Bunshin Saba versus Sadako 2.
快找笔和纸，请笔仙，或许可以救我们。我找到了，快！笔仙，你是我的前世，我是你的后世。在这张画上，笔仙，你是我的前世，我是你的后世。不要与我许愿。 行，你是我的前世，我是你的后世，若要与我相遇，请在上画圈。谢谢，你是我的前世，我是你的后世。你是我的前世，我是你的后世，若要与我相遇，请在上画圈。笔仙，放开了笔仙，帮帮我吧！无论你要我做什么，我都答应你，好吗，笔仙
I really, really love it. It's an utter guilty pleasure, that film. And you're probably thinking, this has the identical intro to the first movie. Yeah, it does. So what? When you're on a good thing, stick to it. And that's clearly what the film producers have done. The first one was great, so let's make a second one. And they camped it up in the second one. They really took everything and threw the rule book away. I don't think the first one followed the rule book much at all. But the second one completely destroys the rule book. So that scene, this is the one I'm thinking of. This scene that you saw there happens halfway through the movie, where the girls are at the professor's kind of lair or whatever, underground research lab. And he needs to call Sadako in and needs to call Bisen in so that Bisen can destroy Sadako. Again, with the whole China good, Japan bad thing there. And as you saw now, finally with English subtitles, they keep saying Bisen, Pen Fairy, but they're calling her Bunsin Saba in the subtitle, which is leading to the confusion with the name. Part 2 really takes the Sadako rulebook and throws it away. The Sadako rulebook and throws it away. So no longer, there was never the 7 days thing to start with in the first movie, but 7 days does not exist in this one. No phone call to give you a warning, and no videotape, and no coming out of the monitor, the TV screen. It's now they watch the video on a website, which is how she comes out. And there is a really good scene in the film where Sadako takes over all the photo frames in the room, and all the photo frames start showing the cursed movie so that there is no way the person can avoid seeing it. Like I said, I really love what they've done with the movie. They've just taken the lore and thrown it all away for both characters, for both Bisen and for Sadako. And they've just made an absolute balls to the wall fun movie. This is what movies should be like. This should just be crazy fun, a bit silly at times, and just something where you can enjoy. Now, this movie, again, is like the first one. It's all a dream. And the great thing about this movie is all the characters that you meet, you find them at the end when she wakes up from her dream. All the characters, who they all are and how they all fit into her story. And the same thing happens in part 3 as well. And I really wish I could show you part 3 just to complete the trilogy. But in fact, the actual intro to part 3 is not that great. It's just girls trying to commit suicide and sister stops her. Mysteriously, the sister's dressed like Sadako in a nice, like Bisen in a nice long red dress. So it kind of makes a reference straight away to who Bisen is in the third movie with the intro. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's look at the 3 serious Bunshin Saba trilogy from Byeongkyun and 2 of the 3 silly Bunshin Saba versus Sadako movies. Now, hopefully this episode makes it fully intact when it goes live. I don't foresee any problems, but fingers crossed everything is okay. I hope you really enjoyed this one. This is probably the most fun for me to make because I really like these films. If you've seen any of the Bunshin Saba movies, write a comment below, let me know what you think. Press like if you enjoyed the movie, subscribe like always if you're new here and you thought, wow, this was kind of fun, watching the intros to these silly Chinese horror movies that I've never heard of, and then just finding out a little bit more about them. That's cool. I hope you've enjoyed something, and I hope you've learned something as well in this little series that I've got going here. I'll catch you in the next episode, which should hopefully be next week, but who knows? It's a new year, it's new things to do. If you haven't already, I've got a new channel called Shockmania. Please join it. It's on the up, and there's a lot of great horror content on there. I think you might enjoy that if you enjoyed this video. Otherwise, I will catch you next time.